Tonight, a rocky start deja vu for our boys in blue.
Hold in front, shot, rebound, score! Loose in front, Abel, rebound, scores! Anticipating a pulse, scores! Kucherov!
Definitely not the playoff opener the Leafs wanted. We'll break down how Toronto lost at home.
Last time I checked on the sign out there, it doesn't say Toronto place, it says Ontario place.
Plus, Doug Ford strong-arms Toronto's next strong mayor. Mid-campaign, why Ford says no matter what the local candidates want, Ontario Place is for his government to decide.
So we've decided we're going forward with an appeal, and I could not be more excited about it.
And a landmark case against the Ford government's climate policy is dismissed. Why the 7 young activists behind the fight say this decision isn't the end of it. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Well, I'm sure you saw it was a rough night for the Leafs. Despite having better odds coming into the first round of the playoffs, Tampa schooled Toronto tonight. 7-3 was the final. And it's, of course, bringing back painful memories for a lot of fans. Greg Russ joins us live from Scotiabank Arena tonight. Hey there, Greg. What went wrong?
Well, Chris, the simple answer is the Leafs just got off to an atrocious start in this game, and they could not recover. I mean, and the sad part about that from a Leaf perspective is the fact you've got this series at home to start, and you've got this incredible crowd behind you because this place was electric going into the night. But just a minute 18 into this game, Tampa is able to suck the energy out of this building with a goal, and there was no looking back. They were up 3-0 by the end of the first period, and the Leafs showed some life early in the second period. It looked like they were trying to get back into the game. They were down just 3-2 at one point, but then Michael Bunting takes a really bad penalty, and a match penalty for elbowing, which comes with a 5-minute major, and by the end of the second period it was 6-2 for the Lightning as a result of that penalty, and they cruised to that easy 7-3 victory. And I can tell you that the Leafs dressing room after this game was a grim place.
You know, not the start you ever really want to have, but you know, I thought we found our way there, and then obviously you know, pretty simple bad start and a lot of penalty trouble. So
we're loose around our net. It's been a strength of ours all season long, both in our goaltending and managing rebounds and things like that, and our defending on the inside. You know, those 2 tap-ins that we give there, that's uncharacteristic for us.
Yeah, uncharacteristic loss definitely for this Leafs team. And I'll tell you, a lot of the fans weren't having it. By, you know, early in the third period, there were a lot of empty seats as people were already filing out of here and leaving. And, you know, a lot of people were in Maple Leaf Square to watch this game. It was a cold night, very cold, some wet flurries out there, but they stood out there for hours to watch this. They got a dud, and we talked to some of the fans right after this one.
Even being here so many years, you would think the players now would have a little bit of experience going into the playoffs, right? But I don't know. It just seems like they're not like grabbing hold of that. But hopefully we just go into game 2 coming out a little bit stronger, right?
It's the same thing. It's just they can't get it done. They can't get it done. They can't set the pace at the beginning.
Every year you get your hopes up, excited, but then this was a little disappointing. I think we still got it in the bag, though.
Well, they say they still have it in the bag. This is a 7-game series, a long way to go. And the good news for the Leafs is they don't have to wait long to get back at it. They go for game 2 here at Scotiabank Arena on Thursday night. So the Leafs are going to have to shake this off before then. And I should tell you this, Chris. I mean, again, it is just one game. Regardless of how much you lose the game by, it's only one game that you fall down in the series. So look at it this way. Last year, the Leafs won Game 1. They went on to lose the series to Tampa, and Tampa head coach John Cooper was quick to point that out afterwards. He knows that this is a Leaf team that has a lot of talent, and he expects that they will bounce back in Game 2 of this series. So we'll see if the Leafs can do just that, Chris.
Keeping that optimism alive. Greg Ross, thanks so much for this tonight. Now to the ongoing debate over what to do with Ontario Place, and today the Ford government officially unveiled its plan to update the prime waterfront space. It'll include a private spa, a beach, a restaurant, and as the Premier hinted last week, we now know it'll also be the new home of the Science Centre. In a moment, we'll show you how Toronto mayoral candidates are reacting. But first, Lorenda Redekop walks us through the Premier's plans.
Premier Doug Ford unveiled the latest renderings for Ontario Place, a larger concert stage, restaurants, public areas and a beach, the much talked about and controversial private spa, and the Science Centre.
But let me tell you about the Science Centre. This is going to be spectacular.
The centre would be in the raised pods, plus another building.
This is going to be state of the art. All of us grew up going to the Science Centre one time or another. It's tired.
But the government says the new site will have less square footage.
The future Science Centre will likely be smaller than what's existent today at Don Mills and Eglinton. That is a structure that's very old, was designed many years ago.
The government says much of the space isn't efficiently used. It plans to demolish the building and build thousands of homes at the site, including affordable and nonprofit homes. The opposition has questions about this new plan.
Who stands to benefit from all of this? Has the land already been promised to a developer? If so, who?
He's treating public property, the Ontario Science Centre and Ontario Place, like it's his own private property that he can just make a decision about without consulting with the people of Ontario who own the property.
The government says it has consulted on Ontario Place, but people who live near the Science Centre say they were never asked for their opinions, as they're losing an attraction. The Premier's response to them?
I'm going to say you're getting a brand new subway station that you never had before. You're going to be able to get to a job quicker. You're going to be able to come down to Ontario Place a lot quicker.
The development of Ontario Place has become a big issue in the Toronto mayoral race. But what if the new mayor doesn't agree with Ford's vision?
Yeah, well, I always respect that Toronto's the host, the city. But last time I checked on the sign out there, it doesn't say Toronto Place, it says Ontario Place.
The government says the Science Centre will remain open in its current location for now, with construction of the new centre to begin in 2025. Lorenda Redicott, CBC News, Toronto.
So as Lorenda just said there, and as you've no doubt seen over the past number of days, some Toronto mayoral candidates say they're ready to stand up to Ford on his plan down by the water. Ali Chiasson has that part of our coverage tonight.
The sign says Ontario Place, but as Anna Bailau points out, it's Toronto land.
There it says Ontario Place. The land up there, it says City of Toronto leased to the Government of Ontario. So I think there's conversations that need to happen.
Candidate Anna Bailau has been campaigning on relocating the Science Centre to the old Ontario Place site in an effort to build more affordable housing in the Thorncliffe and Flemington Park neighbourhoods and turn the old Science Centre building into a community centre, not bulldoze it, as Ford suggested.
The existing Ontario Science Centre is a heritage building, needs to be kept, and it needs to be worked as a community hub with consultation in the community on the services that they need.
Candidate Mitzi Hunter would rather it stay put.
If you talk to any of the residents, it really is a defining part of Flemington Park, Thorncliffe Park, and the Don Mills community.
She says the timing couldn't be worse to move the Science Centre.
One of the things that we've always said is that too bad we didn't have better transit there, and we're just about to get that with the Eglinton Crosstown set to open, as well as the Ontario line having a stop right there.
Olivia Chow?
Don't move it.
Then what happens here?
When I'm a mayor, I will keep Ontario Place public. Build a beautiful park, accessible to all, keep the trees, and the songbirds and the beaches.
And less parking lot, where I spoke with candidate Anthony Furey today.
Look around, all I see is parking lots. I did have a good time at the Bare Naked Ladies concert here last summer at Budweiser Stage, but otherwise it's a giant parking lot and then a concert space. I mean, let's get her done.
Whatever the is, Furey says the public should have a voice.
Any of these plans that are discussed could move forward, they could proceed, but as Mayor of Toronto, I want to make sure that everyone has their say.
That's what some of the candidates have to say. There's a virtual public consultation tonight to have yours. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, let's get to Meg Roberts with the first look at your forecast. And Meg, people out there who were loving last week's summer-like temperatures are maybe having a bit of a rough week this week.
Well, Chris, yesterday wasn't particularly nice. I think today might have been even worse. Take a look at some of these conditions, these temperatures this afternoon. Toronto sitting at around 4, Kitchener 2, a little bit warmer in Windsor at 8, but it was chilly out there today. Now, here's a look at what we have in store for us. As you can see, that light purple there, that is unfortunately some flurries. We're going to see that overnight into tomorrow morning. However, that is going to dissipate. We're going to see some clear skies, no cloud coverage into tomorrow afternoon. However, just in time for our next wave of precipitation that's coming, Wednesday evening into Thursday morning. You see some of that pink there. Unfortunately, that is a mix of snow and rain. So we're still in for some turbulent weather. Clouds are going to continue, and then that is going to clear up. So your outlook for overnight into tomorrow afternoon, it's going to be cool tonight, 0 degrees, but tomorrow it is definitely looking a bit nicer, 12 degrees, and hopefully we see some sun. Chris.
Yeah, not too bad for April. Thanks, Meg. Major news tonight out of Ottawa. Canada's largest federal public service union says 155,000 of its workers are officially going on strike tomorrow after negotiations with the federal government failed to produce a deal by tonight's strike deadline. Now, mediated contract negotiations between the Public Service Alliance of Canada and the government began earlier this month and continued through the weekend. Wage increases have been the main focus, and the federal government, meantime, has said it's put forward a fair and competitive offer. Back in Toronto, gridlock continues to be a major grind for a lot of people, and now the city is working to expand a program helping traffic flow at major intersections. Talia Ricci has that story.
The words traffic and Toronto seem to go hand in hand these days.
I decided to take the GO train simply because I wanted to avoid any of the gridlock earlier this morning.
Worst, after COVID, they changed a lot.
I can't get anywhere in less than an hour.
The city says it's expanding its traffic agents program to manage congestion and increase road safety.
The city's traffic agents are trained professionals who will work to ensure that traffic flows smoothly and safely through our streets. As special constables, traffic agents have the authority to ensure road users comply with traffic laws and regulations.
The 14 traffic agents will be placed where they're needed most, with 1 or 2 agents working at each of the 16 priority locations, depending on the size and complexity of an intersection. Some of the locations include Front Street West and Bay Street, Adelaide Street West and University, and Yonge and Eglinton. Toronto Police are also supporting the program on a 6-month pilot basis.
Up to 20 police service members per day will enhance the program by staffing these locations during morning and afternoon rush hour and other periods of high traffic volume. Our service will be providing the police and special constables on a voluntary callback basis with no on-duty operational resources utilized for the pilot.
Some of the people who are on these streets daily as cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers say this is one solution that could help, but others say it's going to take a lot more than this to fix Toronto's traffic problems.
Unfortunately, I don't see there being any sort of a difference or impact.
I think government should make any other efforts instead of these type of things.
Because when I've seen that, it has made a big difference. I think less cars off the road would be great too.
The city says it is just one of the measures being taken to address congestion ahead of summer events and multiple construction projects.
City staff are working very closely with MLS, the Rogers Centre, and other partners to establish what we're calling event traffic management zones. These zones will feature increased traffic management support from our traffic agents, temporary traffic signal timings, use of portable variable message signs, all to manage the flow of event attendees.
The city says they plan to continue monitoring intersections like this to help them best allocate their resources. They say they're also still going through applications, and they plan to hire 30 traffic agents in total. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
3 people were rescued from a fire that broke out in an apartment building on King Street tonight. Police were called to the building near Jameson just before 5 for reports of smoke on the 4th floor. Firefighters rescued 3 people and were able to put the fire out quickly. 1 person was rushed to hospital with critical injuries. Now, some residents were evacuated while others were told to shelter in place. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. For nearly 5 years, Premier Ford's government has been fighting to keep secret his letters to his cabinet ministers, laying out their marching orders. Now that fight has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Our senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, has the latest.
Thank you, ministers. Please be seated.
After his first cabinet was sworn in following the 2018 election, Premier Doug Ford gave his ministers mandate letters, marching orders setting out his government's priorities. But Ford didn't make those mandate letters public, so a CBC journalist asked for copies under Ontario's Freedom of Information laws. The government refused.
This is an issue that matters a lot, I think, but it's not sexy to talk about access to information.
The government said the mandate letters were exempt from disclosure because they would reveal the substance of cabinet deliberations. 3 straight legal decisions rejected that argument. The final ruling is now in the hands of the Supreme Court.
The letters were placed on a cabinet agenda and distributed at a cabinet meeting.
The language that is used is not intended, for example, to offer a broad blanket exemption to all cabinet-related documents.
It just seems to be almost universal. The governments actually like secrecy. You have fewer problems if the public doesn't know what you're doing.
As the lawyers argued about the mandate letters in Ottawa, the Premier took a question in Toronto.
What was in the mandate letters is what we said during the election. I was so transparent. I told everyone what we were going to do, and we're doing it. That's our mandate.
The fact that they're working so hard to try to prevent Ontarians from seeing these letters, to me, it points to something not smelling right. There's something that they want to hide.
It's unclear how long the Supreme Court will take to decide whether Ford's mandate letters must be made public. In major cases like this, it typically takes around 6 months, and that decision could have an impact on access to information, not just in this province, but across Canada. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, a win tonight for the Ford government from an Ontario court. The court dismissing a landmark case brought by 7 young activists against the provincial government's climate policies. The judge, though, leaving the door open, saying that cases like this are an appropriate legal question for the courts to decide. Dale Manukduk has this story.
We've decided we're going forward with an appeal, and I could not be more excited about it.
Alex Neufeld is one of 7 people who took the Ontario government to court, alleging its climate plan fails to protect them and future generations, breaching their charter rights. Today, an Ontario Superior Court of Justice ruled in the province's favor.
The overall result is a loss in the sense that the application was dismissed, but I think it's important to note that there are many positive elements in the decision that provide hope for the future of this case.
The plaintiffs say the weaker emissions target brought in after Doug Ford's government replaced the Liberal climate plan is too low, and argue it will have catastrophic consequences of climate change for Ontarians.
Justice Vermette writes in her ruling that as a result of climate change, the applicants and Ontarians in general face an increased risk of death and an increased risk of security of the person. However, that is not the relevant question in this case. The relevant question is whether the target imposed an increased risk, and she writes they do no such thing.
However, the judge did rebuke the government's position that the target is meaningless, writing while Ontario's contributions to global warming may be numerically small, it is real, measurable, and not speculative. Ultimately, Ontario's emissions contribute to climate change and the increased risk that it creates. The applicants began this journey 4 years ago, marching into Queen's Park, including a then 12-year-old Zoe Curie-Matzner. She's choosing to see the positives.
It makes me feel kind of happy because these are truths that we know, but to have them written down in a legal document is a pretty damning indictment of the Ontario government.
CBC News reached out to the province for comment but did not receive a response. The legal team representing the plaintiffs hope to have an appeal court date by next year.
Being with other young people like myself who are very involved in climate activism, very involved in their own communities and making a difference, it does make me feel like we are going to get a win at some point.
Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's get back to Meg now with our extended forecast. And Meg, such a different week we're dealing with this week.
Boy, oh boy, does today not make you want to go back to last week with those beautiful warm conditions. The good news is there's some warmer temperature on the way. I should say seasonably warm, nothing like we saw last week. You're unfortunately going to have to keep that umbrella handy because we are going to see some chance of showers and potentially flurries. And you might be wondering, sunscreen, it's not going to be that warm, but the UV index is going to be relatively high tomorrow. So just taking a look at what has happened today. Today's high temperature of 4 degrees. degrees, the normal high temperature at around 12. So it was chilly today. But to add a little positivity into this, in 1965, the record low was at -11 on this day. So we're doing a little bit better of that. In that, of course. So here's a look at the forecast here. Tonight into tomorrow, we're going to see some of that cloud, but then it's going to clear up at around noon. And then we're going to see some clouds again, and the next bit of precipitation is going to come in Wednesday evening into Thursday morning. That's where you see some of the green there. Clouds are going to continue, and then they should be clearing up a little bit later on in the week there. Now, the overnight temperatures in southern Ontario, Windsor at 1 degrees, Chatham, Kent, and Sarnia, low, -1 and -2, so it's going to be chilly. The good news is, look at those temperatures for Windsor, Essex tomorrow, 15 degrees, and as you can see, lots of sunshine there. Sarnia and Chatham, Kent, a little bit cooler at 10 degrees. Now, moving on over to the Golden Horseshoe area, like I said, if you were out at the Leafs tailgate, you know it was cold this evening. Toronto at 0 degrees, Hamilton -2, and like I said, you're going to see a chance of flurries and rain. Tomorrow, a little bit nicer, 13 degrees in Toronto, Hamilton 13, so we have that to look forward to. Hopefully we see the sun come out. And of course, the 5-day forecast, those temperatures are getting a little bit warmer into the midweek. We might see a 20-degree day, which would be nice, and those conditions are tapering off into Sunday, into next week. Chris.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Meg. Finally, tonight, signs of spring are in overdrive north of Los Angeles with a super bloom of golden poppies and wildflowers. An unusually wet winter set the stage for this stunning show in California's Antelope Valley. Carpets of breathtaking flowers so big and vibrant they can even be seen from space. The area is a protected reserve showcasing about 700 hectares of the eye-popping state flower, open to the public year-round, but it's only filled with poppies for a small slice of the year. Nice to see. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Maribel Tarouk has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6, and we're preempted at 11 tomorrow because of hockey. Enjoy that game. Hopefully it's better than today. Have a great night, everybody.